Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Inside the Parenting Matrix with me, your host, Bryan Post. Thank you so much for joining me yet again as we dig into the parenting matrix, and I try to give you some very clear, very specific ideas, thoughts, and suggestions on exactly how the parenting matrix works and what you can do to break out of it. So in today's episode, we're going to go to one of my favorites. And this is a clip. It's called Boston 24/7. This is a clip from that particular show. And we're going to go in and I show this one in my lectures all the time. We're going to go in and we're going to look at it. And this is a school one. So we're going to watch it because it's not that long of a clip, and then we're going to back it up. And I'm going to show you guys how to break out of the matrix. It's just a different perspective. We are trapped in the parenting matrix and we don't realize it. And it is so important that if we truly want to have breakthroughs with children, that we start doing things differently. And that starts with seeing things differently. So let's go ahead and get started.
I'm not going to change the world, but I hope I'm making a difference.
Here's all my early dismissal students across the street.
With summer coming, Madison Park's principal, Chuck McAfee, knows that some students find warm weather especially distracting.
Sir, what are you doing?
It seemed like a good idea, but where do you really belong?
All right, let's get there.
Being the principal means being consistent, being fair, and about communication.
Not a bad idea, though.
You have to have a really good sense.
Now, what makes this clip so unique is that you have a principal of a school who truly is relating to children in a different way. He is, and that very first example is proof of that. I mean, he sees the kid outside taking a nap in the middle of school. He says, "Sir, what are you doing?" So he holds the authority figure. "What are you doing?" But he's not threatening. He doesn't move right in to punish the young man. And as they're walking back, he just says, "You know where you're supposed to be." Kid smiles, starts heading that way. As they're walking back, he puts his hand around the kid, puts his arm around the kid. Kid has a smile on his face, and the principal ends it with, "Not a bad idea, though," because he understands. He understands in warm weather, children are mobile and they're active, and being outside feels good. No big deal. There are many, many situations where inside the parenting matrix, that same student could have been sent to the principal's office, given some kind of punishment, potentially, if that was more than his first or second warning, potentially expelled from school for the day. But this principal addressed it in a different way. And he says right here, you have to have a really good sense of humor. It's critical. The kid's going to put gum on the camera, right in front of the camera. Bam, there it is. So now let's dig a little deeper, because what's going to be really interesting here is there are two, I'm not going to say heroes because they're not really heroes, but there are two main characters in our subject matter today. There's a principal and then there's a teacher. And you're going to see right up front and right away who's focused on relationship and who's focused on behavior. But then I'm going to show you how the parenting matrix shows up.
It's a humor to be successful at this. Okay, he's looking around, walks right up. Look at this.
What?
He puts the gum right directly on the camera. Thinks that nobody's going to see him. That's unbelievable. Sometimes it's not always fun. These are young people, and so we do have rules.
Let's go. No hats. basic rule. We like to think that you're in school to learn. It's just one of the rules that we're trying to work with.
You took my hat. My hat was on the table. It was now on my head. Why would I walk around and put a hat on my head?
Let me go up and see him. You wait here.
This student is angry that his hat was confiscated by one of his teachers. A minor incident at some schools.
How we
But
doing?
at Madison Park, Chuck McAfee knows things can quickly spin out of control.
I put my hat on the table. Other teachers didn't have a problem with that. Why did he have a problem with it?
Little issues that's going on here that I'm not getting.
It reflected me.
See, I mean, I'm trying to figure this out. There's always two sides of the stories. I mean, I cannot imagine my son would come down to my office about just his hat if he wasn't wearing his hat.
Yeah.
Why did the teacher take my hat?
Yeah.
I don't know.
He had his hat. He left his hat in a place it wasn't supposed to be. I took his hat.
What's the point?
He doesn't really perform at any kind of acceptable level. He caught a real nasty attitude about it.
Why want to leave school?
Yeah, I know. He can be laxing about his hat and get his hat at the end of the school day.
Or you said at lunchtime?
Well, see, I'm at lunchtime if I'm a nice guy and you don't treat me bad. When you
Did
leave
he say
here,
anything?
yeah, he called me all kinds of names. He was swearing
Oh, I
at me
didn't
and
hear that
everything
part.
before he
You
was
didn't tell me
leaving.
that
He called, no, you know me, but before he left here, I was all kinds of,
All right.
MFAS type
Oh, I
stuff.
see. All right. How we doing? Come on.
Principal, Mr. McAfee, obviously is focused on relationship. All of his actions, even his interaction with the teachers, focused on relationship. He's focused on trying to understand, and I think he grasped an understanding, although he didn't go further into it with the teacher, but he grasped the understanding. He heard what he needed to hear. Even with the teacher following him to tell him that he was called all kinds of bad names, Mr. McAfee said, okay, yeah, I didn't hear all that, but okay, I got it. Which kind of reaffirmed the teacher, made him feel a little bit better, so he was able to go back to class. But what was the focus of the teacher? It was focused on the hat, and then it was focused on the attitude. It was focused on the fact that the kid has had bad behavior in the past, and then he had called the teacher a lot of bad names. What is that focus? That focus is all behavior. And when you operate with inside the parenting matrix, that is the focus, all behavior. So behavior becomes the major play. Behavior becomes the threat, it becomes the issue. So when Mr. McAfee re-engages the student, the first thing he says, in all the nuances of this video are so amazing because they're so subtle. Just this very next thing, how we doing? Come on, please. He addresses the child, how we doing, as though he is creating concern. Then he says, come on, which establishes authority. And then he says, please, which establishes respect. So we have concern, we have authority, and we have respect, all in one statement. And watch, and then remember, this is a student who previously was really stressed out and cussing out another teacher. So let's watch the student's response.
Please. How we doing?
The longer you do this, you get a sixth sense. If I get it right, I'm going to find out the root of the problem.
Now,
Almost my hat back.
all right, here's what I want to tell you. Now, how old are you?
I'm 18.
And see, that's the tough part. When you get 18, you're like grown, and it's hard to deal with you because you're a young
I
adult.
mean,
If my hat was small enough to fit in my pocket, I would have put it in my pocket. Now, he's just trying to do this to show me that he got power over me, this and
That's
that.
what I thought it was.
So it's very interesting. So number one, you see that the student actually followed the principals into his office. He sat out and he's having a conversation with him. He's having an adult conversation. The principal acknowledges that the kid is 18. He acknowledges that obviously there's been some issue over the hat. The student says, if my hat would have fit inside my pocket, I would have put the hat in my pocket. I didn't put it in my pocket. I had it sitting on my desk. The student did not have the hat on his head. That is very important. Very important that you realize that. And you hear me say often, stress causes confusion, distorted thinking, suppresses the short-term memory. I want you to recognize who's showing up as the most stressed with the most suppressed memory. But before we get to that, there's a little bit more here.
Obviously, you got upset. That's what I got. All right. I was trying to figure out what was this about. It's not about the hat. You feel like you didn't get that much respect. All right, come on. I want to try to keep you in school. So I got the point. The teacher got the point. You got the point. We have to straighten this out with your teacher. Hold on.
So he pretty much nailed it. He said, I know it's not about the hat. It's about you were disrespected. And the student even said that his perspective of the teacher was that the teacher was just trying to show that he had power and control over it. Well, it's an 18-year-old young man, right? So he's probably, depending, this is his background, apparently we're going to hear, is pretty rough. And being disrespected is not an okay thing. We as adults, we don't like to be disrespected. So what makes us feel like it is okay for us to disrespect kids, regardless of their age, and then not be okay with the reactions that they have to that? So Mr. McAfee immediately says, this is about power. I get it. He says, now we got to get your hat back. Now, as soon as he says, we got to get your hat back, we got to work this out with your teacher, the student starts to stress. And so I want you to watch the anxiety as it starts to go up. I'm going to back it up just a little bit because it's so subtle, and that's what I love about this particular clip. And so I'm going to stop it several times because I want you to see the nuances.
Point. The teacher got the point. You got the point. We have to straighten this out with your teacher. Hold on.
See what happens? The student says, I just want my hat, and he starts heading towards the door. So he's prone to fight. This is important because a lot of times we see children who we perceive to be aggressive, or who we perceive to be violent, or who we perceive to have gone into a rage, when in reality, it's none of those things. If given the opportunity, there are many more of us that are wired first to freeze or to flee before we are to fight. So when this young man starts to feel agitated, he starts to move towards the door. But I want you to watch how the principal handles it. The principal doesn't reach out and grab him. He doesn't say, you can't leave, it's a school day. He doesn't say, turn around and look at me, make eye contact with me. Watch what he says and watch what he does and tell me if you feel like while he's doing and saying those things, if the teacher is uptight, if the principal is uptight, or if he's relaxed. And it's going to happen quickly.
We're not finished. Don't walk away.
Come on, yo. Come on, man.
Don't go home over your hat. Hold on. I just know from experience, sometimes these little things can turn into bigger things if you don't do the right thing.
Do you see the subtle nature, the power? It's the power of relationship. And I love this clip because it shows it in such a subtle way. The student starts to escalate. Mr. McAfee says, hold on, don't go. Don't leave school over your hat. And the kid says, I just want my hat. And Mr. McAfee says, I know. And in the whole process, he's completely non-threatening. In fact, he's so non-threatening that he is handling a piece of paper from a passing teacher, looking at it, still saying to the kid, this is a principal who's in complete control. He is in complete control. He's completely regulating and controlling this environment. And that's what relationship allows you to do. It's what understanding allows you to do. It's what love allows you to do. It allows you to be completely in control of the environment. And so let's just watch the subtle nature again. To me, it's just magical.
We're not finished. Don't walk away.
Come on, yo. Come on, man.
Don't go home over your hat.
You see that? See how he keeps the kid pulled in? The only reason the kid is not running at this point is because he doesn't feel threatened. There's no threat. The principal completely turned away, dealing with something else, keeping the kid locked in. It's like no eye contact because eye contact's not necessary. Eye contact overwhelms the brain. He knows the kid hears him. He's got the kid. He's got him in relationship. Handles a piece of paper. He pulls the kid in so much. Watch when they walk around the corner. The kid has been attracted back towards him so much that Mr. McAfee actually almost runs over the young man as the young man's giving the kid sitting in the hallway their dap. So it's like complete control.
Oh, no. I just know from experience, sometimes these little things can turn into bigger things if you don't do the right thing. This is your third high school.
Complete control. Now we're back in the hallway. We're back outside. We're mano a mano, man to man. We're having a conversation. I'm not talking to you like an adult to a kid. I'm showing you respect. I'm showing you regard. I'm showing you consideration. I'm telling you, you're 18. I want to make sure you finish school. Don't leave. We don't want to leave school over a hat. It's my responsibility to take care of you, look after you, and then we move on through it.
I'm trying to make sure that this year is somehow successful because you're going to get an education. All right, let me bring you over here. Let me go get your hat.
Principal McAfee convinces this angry student to sit down with the teacher who took away his hat and try to work it out.
At this point, to me, the young man looks pretty relaxed. You know he's got to be anxious because he's still got to go back and deal with his teacher. But he feels the regulation of Mr. McAfee, therefore he feels the safety. So he's okay. Mr. McAfee has helped the young man's brain to settle. He's thinking clearly, his short-term memory is available, and he's ready to go and have a conversation and get his hat back and stay in school. He feels like the teacher and Mr. McAfee are on the same page.
Hi, this is Mr. Wilkins. I want these two people to communicate and solve their problem.
All right. This is important. Oh my goodness. So Mr. McAfee, regulating the environment, regulating the relationship, says, I want these two people. Mr. McAfee, who says to the kid, Mr. Wilkins, he calls the kid by his surname, Mr. Wilkins. Total respect, total regard. Brings the kid to the room of the stressed out teacher. Mr. McAfee knows the teacher's stressed out. Mr. McAfee knows the teacher's an asshole. But Mr. McAfee is trying to give his teacher the benefit of the doubt. Because Mr. McAfee is that way. Because Mr. McAfee is that way, he expects his teacher to be that way. And what happens? Let's see how it starts off from the very beginning.
Anything?
Right there. The teacher, look at his body posture. His posture, his body language, his tone of voice, his eye contact is all threatening. It's all threatening. He says, have a seat. What's the kid do? Kid has a seat. Then the teacher says, anything to say? Like he's already ready for a fight. Alan Shore says the core of the self is nonverbal and unconscious, thus lies in patterns of affect regulation. Big Papa says, in times of stress, it's not what we say or do, it's how we feel when we're doing and saying it.
Yeah. How come you only decide to take my hat? Comment how I have on the table.
Student, regulated by Mr. McAfee. Brain is online. Memory online. Student respectfully says, yeah. Why did you only decide to take my hat when Carmen had her hat on the table too? The only person who has not achieved a regulated state at this point in this triad is the teacher. And listen to his response.
And then rather than that, you could just be like, yo, Will, put the hat in
The student, before we get to the teacher, the student gives the teacher a potential solution. Number one, I want to find out what it is that I really did wrong, because Carmen had her hat on her table. So help me understand what I really did wrong. And number two, instead of getting mad at me and taking my hat, why didn't you just tell me to go put my hat in the locker? This is the kid. This is the kid. What's the adult's response?
I don't like that tone. I don't like that tone.
I don't like that tone. How else could this 18-year-old young man, who you're going to hear comes from some rough circumstances, how else could he have stated his attempt to understand so that the teacher would not have felt threatened? Is there possibly any way? And you know why there's no other way the student could have expressed this? It's because the teacher is not responding. The teacher is reacting. The teacher is trapped inside of the matrix. The teacher is trapped inside of the matrix. And you know what's at the fundamental root of being trapped in the matrix? Reactivity. Reactivity and fear and stress and overwhelm. And a need to control, a need to suppress, a need to punish, a need to shame, a need to blame, a need to not take responsibility. The teacher is being totally reactive. He is in his small brain. He is in his amygdala. He's in his reactive brain right now. He is completely missing the point. The student is the most regulated one between the two of them right now. The child is the regulated figure.
I'm not what you're gonna get. You're gonna do. No, that's not the tone I'm gonna get, because you're not following the rules. If the hat is sitting over, I'm gonna tell you
where I come from, yo. Adult, no adult, yo. If you're gonna
again, who's showing up in a clear, coherent, and logical way? The kid. And watch the teacher's reaction.
treat somebody like that, how you expect me to talk to you?
Okay, Wilkins, here's the deal.
So now the teacher is posturing. He turns around, legs spread, leans forward, emotional. Here's the deal. You're either going to bow to me or you are going to suffer the wrath, is the energy that the teacher is sending to this young man. The teacher has already explained that this young man is a threat to him. Now he is demonstrating it yet again. All under the auspices, the illusion, the facade of being the regulated adult. And it's all crap. He's stressed out, he's scared, and he doesn't know what to do. What could he do? If we operated outside of the matrix, what could we do even at this point? Because see, the teacher is like a snowball. He's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and this is just going to end in a disaster. What could we do? And I'm asking you all that question. What could the teacher do at this point? And I'm going to play it. I'm not going to interrupt anymore. I'm going to play it, and I'm going to let you decide for yourself.
Here's the deal. The rule is no hats. If I find out the rule is no hats.
Hey, yo, man, what the man? You really begin to piss me off, dog. You're right here running your mouth, doing this thing, thinking that your rules, this and that. Listen to me closely, all right? I don't care about you. I don't give two about you. All I wanted was my damn hat. You have no right to take my hat off no table. If I put my hat on the table, you have the right to be like, well, I don't want that hat there. Put it in the locker. I don't put it in the damn locker. I'm gonna ask somebody so I can put it in the locker. You don't want to go to my business. Now let go. Yo, don't put your hands on me. Yo, what the hell, man? What the hell, man?
Shit got serious real quick, didn't it? My question to you is, did it have to get that way? Could we as adults, could we have done something different had we been not operating out of our reactive, matrix-driven brain? Of course, the answer is yes. But you don't know these things when you're stuck in the matrix. So let's just back it up.
And solve their problem.
Anything to say?
What could we do here? We could very simply say, look, man, that went down. This is me, the teacher, talking. And in order for me to speak this way, I have to be able to admit that I messed up. But see, because when you operate outside of the matrix, it's about taking responsibility, personal responsibility. And when we're willing to take personal responsibility, then we're willing to own our role in the dynamic, regardless of whether we feel like we did something wrong or not. If a situation unravels and it unfolds in a way that is not okay with us, we have to be willing to accept responsibility. Because at the end of the day, there are 100 different things within the realm of accepting responsibility. There are 100 different things that we could have done differently to have influenced the situation differently. So when we come to that perspective, when we start operating from that understanding, that's outside of the matrix, then the kid walks in and we say, look, man, that kind of went down, you know, like I wish it hadn't. I'm sorry that happened. All right? So let's say we said that. Let's see what the kid says.
Yeah. How come you only decide to take my hat, comment on her hat on the table, and then rather than that, you could just be like, yo, Will, put the hat in the locker.
You're right. You're right, man. You're right. To be honest with you, I didn't even see Carmen's hat. And I just got caught up in the moment. Here's your hat. Just make sure you put your hat in your locker. Okay, I shouldn't have to tell you put your hat in your locker, right? I don't want hats in the classroom. It's a nice hat. You thought I was gonna keep the hat. I almost thought about keeping the hat, right? Here's your hat. Completely regulate, remove all the threat. Just put your hat in the locker, okay? We're good? All right, we're good. I'll catch up with you. Go get back to class. I'll see you tomorrow. Done. Situation over.
I don't like that tone.
Nothing we can do with that right there. That's all inside the matrix stuff. But here's the thing. Let's go ahead and watch it through a little again.
I don't like that tone. That's what you're gonna get if you're gonna do. No, that's not the tone I'm gonna get because you're not following the rules. If the hat is sitting on, I'm gonna say where I come from, yo. Adult, no adult, yo. If you're gonna treat somebody.
At any given time, we could just validate what the student is saying because he's the right one. He's the logical one. He's the rational one. We're not. And that's why the teacher can't validate him because the teacher is in his reactive brain. He's in his matrix-driven brain.
Like that, how you expect me to talk to you? Okay, Wilkins, here's the deal. The rule is no hats. If I find out the rule is no hats. Hey, yo, man, what?
See, it was the pointing the hand out. See, Wilkins was wanting to say something. The teacher points the hand out. Now we just jumped over. He just got overwhelmed, completely overwhelmed. But here's the reality. From outside of the matrix, There's not a situation you don't have the ability to influence as long as you're willing to take responsibility, maintain your center, maintain your presence, maintain your willingness to understand, which is calming your breath, staying in control of your breath, staying in control of your stress reaction. There's not a situation that we can't influence. Even at this point, with the young man obviously overwhelmed, the teacher is still trying to tell him. Listen to the teacher. You can hear him in the background trying to interrupt.
What the man? You really begin to piss me off, dog. You may have running your mouth. I doing this.
You hear Mr. Wilkins say, I said, Mr. Wilkins, not Mr. Wilkins, I don't even know what the teacher's name is. The teacher continues to say, I said, trying to interrupt. You know what the best thing for him to do right now is? You know how he can potentially begin to regain this environment? By shutting up. By shutting up. He could shut up and he could put his hands up and he could say, you're right. You're right. You know, as I close my eyes, you're right. Close my eyes because I don't want to stimulate him anymore. I'm not worried. I don't want to overwhelm him anymore. You're right. You're right. You're right. Oh, you're right, dude. You're right. Woo. All right, brother. All right. Have a seat, man. Have a seat. We're good. We're good. Now I got to work to regain the child's trust in security and regulation. It's my responsibility to regulate this young man.
This thing, thinking that your rules, this and that. Listen to me closely, all right? I don't care about you. I don't give two about you. All I want to live with my damn hat. You have no right to take my hat off no table. If I put my hat on the table, you have the right to be like, well.
Even now, in his absolute distress, he is trying to be rational. This is a young man who feels completely helpless. He feels overpowered by the teacher and he feels unheard. And then he probably feels uncared for. And he probably took his money, wherever he got the money, however he got the money, could have been his mama's hard-earned money, and he got this hat that he's really proud of. And now the teacher's got this hat. He probably felt really good having the hat. The hat probably gave him some level of connectedness, some level of respect. You know, that's his gear. And the teacher's taking it all away from him. And he feels completely helpless. And yet still, he's trying to be rational and tell the teacher what the teacher could have done.
I don't want that hat there. Put it in the locker. I don't put it in the damn locker. I'm going to ask somebody.
Okay. Never walk up on a child when they're in a state of high agitation as long as they're verbalizing. There are 3 pathways to emotional expression: attitudes, feelings, and behaviors. Right now, this young man is in feelings, and he is having all of his feelings. He feels completely helpless and overwhelmed, but he's expressing his feelings, and he's still trying to be rational so he can get his freaking hat back. The aide walks in, doesn't observe the environment, doesn't know what's going on, just thinks that he knows Mr. Wilkins, thinks he knows Will, and comes in and immediately tries to settle the situation. But the problem, this is more inside the matrix stuff. The problem is he's moving in so quickly because he feels unnerved, because he feels at risk, because he feels anxious, because he hears loud voices and he's scared, and he's coming in and he's going to try to soothe the child, but he's not trying to soothe the child. He's trying to help the child feel better. He's trying to help himself feel better. We get that so wrong when we're operating inside the matrix. We miss that completely. It's our inability to take responsibility. If this aide is going to come into this office, he's got to be willing to take responsibility. Instead, he's reactive. He's doing, in some ways, energetically the same thing the teacher has done. He's being reactive. And he's moving in on the kid, and guess what he's doing to an already sensory overwhelmed young man? He is putting him overboard. He is overloading this young man, completely overloading him. And then what happens when the young man gets overloaded? What does he say? See, this is so interesting. The kid is the most regulated, rational being in the whole dynamic. He says, let go of me. Let go of me. And then he says, don't put your hands on me. And what does the aide do immediately? Moves his hand in. Do you understand what this kid who is sensory overwhelmed? He feels completely at risk. He feels completely exposed. He is trying to maintain some level of identity, some level of human being, some level of just being a human being, some level of I matter, some level of regard. And everyone is discounting him. He gets completely overwhelmed. What does he say? What's happening? And watch what causes the aide to finally stop trying to overwhelm this young man. Let me tell you something. If you can't calm a child down without putting your hands on them, then you should not put your hands on them because you are too overwhelmed yourself. I'll say that again. If you cannot calm a child down without putting your hands on it, this is restraint and things like this are very common with inside the matrix adults. We get stressed out, we get scared, and we immediately want to restrain and overpower the child. That's all it's doing is overpowering. And we justify it by saying the child was at risk of harming themselves or someone else. Usually the kid's just yelling and threatening and not willing to lower their voice or calm down, not because they're doing anything. Truly, they're not doing anything that's physically detrimental. This young man's doing nothing more than yelling. That's all he's doing in this dynamic. He's doing nothing more than yelling. When does the aide finally back up? Watch this.
Yo,
Bam! He stopped then, didn't he? Whoa, he backed up even. He backed up. He's like, oh shit, I guess he's serious. I guess he's serious. He's like, whoa, backed up then. Why could this young man not have gotten that same respect without this? This was caused by the aide. The window getting knocked out was the aide's responsibility. Had that young man just been able to exit that room, that window never would have gotten broken out. But the additional sensory overwhelm put that young man over the edge, and then now you're just an angry 2-year-old. You're just an angry 2-year-old. But then the kid gets shocked. As soon as he does that, now he's shocked. And watch, does he just hit the door and take off running? Does he? No. He's pacing. He got overwhelmed. He's pulled himself back together that quickly. He's pacing. He doesn't know what to do. He just wanted his hat. He just wanted his hat. And now it's led to all of this. But here's where it's going to get more interesting. You thought that was interesting. Wait until you see what comes up next.
It's a tough world out there for young people. They feel very vulnerable. When they feel disrespected, we're in a lot of trouble.
But now we're back to Mr. McAfee. Mr. McAfee observes the situation that got out of control, and he says, these are his words, it's a tough world out there for kids. Let me back it up because I want to make sure I get the exact phrasing.
It's a tough world out there for young people.
It's a tough world out there for young people.
They feel very vulnerable.
They feel very vulnerable.
When they feel disrespected, we're in a lot of trouble.
When they feel disrespected, we're in a lot of trouble. That sings. It sings like a man with understanding. It sings as if he is a man operating outside of the matrix, seeing things different than everyone else sees. It is a tough world out there for kids. They feel vulnerable. When they feel disrespected, we are in a lot of trouble. The matrix is full of incongruent statements. Let's watch what happens next. Actually, there's one more incongruent statement.
They do things sometimes that don't make any sense.
Sometimes it's so easy.
You know, you're dealing with young people.
So then he says they do things sometimes that don't make any sense. What part doesn't make any sense? The getting disrespected, the being overwhelmed, the aide not respecting your space and your boundaries, or the busting out the window. Which part of it doesn't make any sense? Because it all makes perfect sense to me. But then we rationalize it by saying, you know, when you're dealing with young people, this is not a young person, this is an 18-year-old. See, we're operating within the matrix. We are led to believe that we can overpower children and we can dominate them because we do it when they're kids. But when they get older, they don't go for the same thing. They don't kowtow the same way. So when they don't do that, we try to make sense of it, but it discombobulates us and it makes us create all these incongruent messages. It makes us share all these incongruent statements.
Didn't have to explode.
He didn't have to explode. Mr. McAfee was not even there. Mr. McAfee, had you regulated your teacher, Mr. McAfee, had you got your teacher to see the perspective that you were coming from that helped you regulate this young man, had you instructed your teacher in the finer art of taking responsibility and observing the environment and being aware of the student and focusing on relationship and regulation, Mr. McAfee, then the young man wouldn't have had to explode. Had you instructed your aides on how to respect the boundaries and statements of the students in the school, Mr. McAfee, the young man wouldn't have had to explode. Mr. McAfee, ultimately, Mr. McAfee, had you done your job, this whole situation would not have happened. So now you're left scratching your head, and unfortunately, you're going to do what always happens when you're operating inside the parenting matrix, is you're going to blame the child.
After his attempt to make peace between teacher and student backfires, Chuck McAfee has to clean up the mess.
You got to see his hand. He needs a nurse. See his hand. He's going to have to end up having to pay for this.
He's going to end up having to pay for this.
This way.
When things really mess up, it's my fault.
I love that statement. He's going to make two of them. And they are consistent with operating inside the parenting matrix. He says, when things mess up, it's my fault. It's my fault. That's a beautiful statement. It's like, I messed up. Let's disregard the fact that he didn't need to explode, and let's disregard the fact that I just said that he's going to have to pay for this. When I mess up, it's my fault. Beautiful. Love it.
The buck stops here.
Okay, what happened?
The buck stops here. The buck stops here. When things happen, that go bad, when we mess up, it's my fault. The buck stops here by God. I'm going to go in and I'm going to take responsibility for this situation. I'm going to apologize to this young man for setting him up because my teacher didn't have his shit together. We're going to figure this out. We're going to figure out a way to make lemonade out of this lemon, out of these lemons.
I'm trying to talk to him, but he refused to let me talk.
Student says, I'm trying to talk to him, but he refused to let me talk. Accurate statement. Accurate statement.
And then he get me aggravated because he's talking to me like I'm a like.
I felt disrespected yet again. The same reason we started in this situation to begin with.
Like I'm a first grader.
All right, so now I got you're aggravated. So then you turn around, get mad, and punch the window?
Yeah. He makes it seem like I'm stupid.
Okay.
You stick in it. I pay for the window. Listen, my mom can't pay for that window.
Who's going to pay for the window? How are you going to pay for the window? So who's being blamed? So where's the buck really stopping? Because to me, it sounds like the buck is stopping on the kid. Whose fault is it really? Because to me, it sounds like all the fault is being placed on the kid. Right? And what does he say? My mom can't pay for that window. Listen, I got 5 little brothers. 5 little brothers. My mother works 2 jobs.
I got 5 little brothers, and my mom works at 2 jobs, and she can't hardly pay the rent.
She can't hardly pay the rent. 5 little brothers. I am the dad in this home because my mom's got 2 jobs and we're doing the best we can. And I got disrespected and I got overwhelmed and I was wrong for knocking out the freaking window. I was wrong.
Then wait a minute. Then we'll probably talk about some kind of restitution. We'll find a way. All right?
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, it's a beautiful thing. Mr. McAfee says, cool, cool, cool. We'll figure out some kind of restitution. We'll figure out a way for you to take responsibility for knocking out the window. I'm not going to really acknowledge the fact that I screwed up. I'm not going to really acknowledge the fact that the teacher screwed up. I'm not going to really acknowledge the fact that the aide screwed up. I'm not going to acknowledge the fact that 3 grown men didn't have the understanding and the foresight to have enough relationship and enough respect for you to just communicate with you like an adult, like an 18-year-old, a 12-year-old, 5-year-old, an infant. At what point do we take responsibility? At what point do we truly take responsibility and then do something different? And how does the young man end the exchange? By saying thank you. By saying thank you. And what do the adults do?
It's very hard to be a teacher because they deal with everything.
They start justifying and rationalizing their behaviors.
But they got the heart to do this. I thought this one was going to be an easy one. What happened?
This is not a question of heart. This is not a question of heart. This is a question, do they have the mind to be able to do it? Is there enough connection between the heart and the mind to be able to meet a child where they're at in the midst of their stress and their fear? The problem is that we're operating inside of the parenting matrix.
Tone that I didn't like, and I mentioned it. And
he had a tone that I didn't like, and I mentioned it, and he didn't like it, and he went left. Total blame and irresponsibility.
Went left, and he went bad, and I feel real bad. I mean, I'm like,
I know. Let me have this.
I feel real bad, but not enough to go and apologize. I feel real bad, but not enough to offer to pay for that window. I feel real bad, but not enough to offer to come up with some form of restitution. How bad do you actually feel? Save the language, because now all you're doing is just running your trap, right? There's no eye contact here. There's no sense of responsibility here, and it's just going to happen again on another day.
I thought this one would have been an easy one. I don't know what the conversation was, but I know that nobody likes to feel good when kids get angry and put their hands through windows.
yes,
All right, so
See the adults making any eye contact? but we're the very first ones to want kids to look at us.
I don't know. It's about communication. Sometimes we hit it, sometimes we don't. But if they end up doing this, then we lose.
Yeah.
That's all.
If they end up doing this, then we lose. And how many schools across America are dealing with the same challenges and getting the same outcomes? Because it is not about an outcome, it's about a process. The process always dictates the outcome. All we have to do is be willing to really take responsibility for our role in any situation. These kids, time and time again, they show up. They are looking for us as adults to do something different. They are looking for us as adults to lead the way, to guide them, to understand them, to model for them how to engage the world. But when we show up and we're reactive and we're fearful and we're threatening and we're condescending, shaming, blaming, and overwhelmed, all we can expect is that our children will learn the same. And that's what happens when you are parenting inside the matrix. Thank you guys for joining me. I hope this has been helpful for you. If you want to learn how to get outside of the matrix, if you want to learn what it really means to see children differently, to feel differently, to practice love-based methods in raising your children or in educating children or even in doing therapy with children, visit us at www.postinstitute.com or also www.newparentingrevolution.com. You can find both those URLs in the description below. God bless you. We'll see you next time.